What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the day on Thursday. Not a whole heck of a lot to talk about today, as there's no public availability either for practice or media availability with coaches or the locker room, as the Packers are en route to Oakland to take on the Raiders tomorrow night. But did want to jump on at least briefly this afternoon and see if anybody wants anything to talk about in regards to the Green Bay Packers. Like I said, not a whole lot of news, not a whole lot going on, other than the rumored calling of the Packers for one Randall Cobb. That kind of created a mini firestorm on Twitter last night. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network quickly dousing those flames, saying that teams have indeed inquired, but the Packers have not been shopping Randall Cobb. Where's a great place to tailgate? That's a good question. If you're looking around Lambeau, lot 1 is probably your best bet. Good evening. What's up? I'll say Mac on the block. Mac is not on the block. I know I keep seeing that being said on Twitter, and no matter how many times people say it, that doesn't make it so. The Jets have led the charge, reportedly offering a pretty big package. We don't really know what, but supposedly making a big offer for Mac, but the Raiders have said no. The Raiders have said no to all calls and are not shopping Mac. As to your proposed trade, a first-round pick and Randall Cobb, I can't imagine the Raiders saying yes to that. For a premier pass rusher, or one of the top 5 defensive players in the league, it's going to take a bit more than that. What's up, Fargo? How you doing, Taylor? Have we traded for Lawrence Taylor yet? That's good, Adam. Stacy, you'll see me around. As I said yesterday, make sure you're following either my Facebook page, which is Nagler Packers, or just follow me on Twitter at Aaron Nagler. You'll find me. You'll see what I'm doing. Well, why do we still use fullbacks? Well, funny enough, Barry, they haven't used a whole lot of them this preseason, either in practice or in the games. McCarthy's always had a soft spot for him. He does like their ability in the I form, the offset I. And oftentimes what he really enjoys doing is, bringing in that fullback and running back, making the defense counter with the base personnel, and then splitting the fullback out wide. He's done that quite a bit, especially with Gutekunst. Very, very rarely, if ever, do they actually throw to him. But they can spread it out and then kind of get the defense in advantageous looks for Rodgers. I think he just likes another piece to kind of play with when it comes to designing the offense and trying to keep defensive coordinators unbalanced. How's Jair? Nick? Sounds like he's great. He didn't seem to come out any worse for wear from his first action there in the preseason game against the Steelers. He seems to be right as rain, so I would expect to see him at least a little bit tomorrow night. Is Jones our best running back? Brian, I think so. When everyone's healthy and operating at 100%, I think Aaron Jones is the best back in the backfield. Now, the issue is always going to be about pass protection. Can he step up in that regard? He hasn't been, on the field a whole lot to see if he's been improving at all in that area. The early returns were good prior to his hamstring issue, but we'll see what happens. I expect we'll see him a little bit tomorrow night. If not, we're going to have to wait probably until the 4th preseason game. But even if then, after that, obviously he's suspended for the first 2 weeks of the season. It may be a while for him to kind of get into a groove and kind of take the number of snaps that he should be allocated. But by the time November and December rolls around, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Jones, provided he's healthy. Will you still go live on Facebook? Yes, I will. Like I said, make sure you follow my non-Packers news page, my personal page, Nagler Packers. Find it on Facebook, follow it, and you'll get notifications whenever I'm live. How's King's shoulder? David, seems good. You never really know until you get a full kind of game's worth of action under your belt and see how he responds to that. But early returns are good. He hasn't had a whole lot of contact with it yet, so we'll see. But like I said, early indications are that he's going to be fine. Do you think they would keep 2 fullbacks? I think if there were 2 fullbacks worth keeping, if there were 2 fullbacks making a case, They might, but Joe Carriage, yet again fighting through injury, hasn't got a whole lot of opportunities in the preseason, hasn't been doing a whole lot on special teams, so I think he's got a long climb to make the roster. Now, there's still a bit of time left. 2 preseason games is a lot of opportunity to put something on tape and make the coaches rethink things, especially if you can produce on special teams. But it's an uphill battle, and I think Ripkowski is probably your one kind of good bet, although I can't even say he's a lock. We'll see. Joseph says Cobb. Yes, Randall Cobb was the subject of many trade rumors last night. It doesn't sound like the Packers have been shopping him at all. Maybe a few teams have called regarding Randall's availability, but the Packers have pretty much said he's not available. Is Kendricks tradable? That's a good question, Felipe. I suppose if someone's desperate for help from a move tight end or something, possibly. I don't think anybody's going to trade for that contract. Not that it's exorbitant, it's not a huge cap hit or anything, but it's not like he's dynamic in any sense of the word, and he's not an all-around guy. He's a guy you're going to get some nice move downfield, move the sticks. We saw, he's less than dynamic as a number 1 tight end. I don't think anybody's going to give up draft capital for him. Well, that said, it only takes one team, so you never really know, but I'd be surprised if someone made that kind of move. Why are the comments talking about you leaving, Aaron? Grant, because I'm leaving. Tomorrow's my last day with Packers News. Just make sure, like I said, you're following me either at my personal Facebook page at Nagler Packers, or make sure you're following me on Twitter at Aaron Nagler, and you'll see everything coming up. My plans of covering the Packers and world domination. I will accept no less. Do you enjoy Hard Knocks, and do you think Baker is going to be good? I'll tell you what, anybody following me on Twitter knows I've had Baker Mayfield as QB1 in this draft class, basically since the season ended. The college football season ended. Prior to the draft, prior to the combine, prior to everything, Baker Mayfield's been my QB1. And I wasn't surprised when the Browns took him first overall, though some people seem to be. I thought he was far and away the best quarterback in this class. I think he's going to be very, very good in Cleveland. He's going to help turn things around there, along with John Dorsey, Elliott Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith, those guys. Not so much sold on Hugh Jackson myself. And then, your question about Hard Knocks. I actually enjoy it a little bit more this year. I've been kind of tuned out on Hard Knocks for the last few years, but this year, I've watched it, but I just haven't been invested. This year is the first year in a long time that I'm actually kind of, I don't know, I'm really interested. I'm hooked on some of the storylines, the players, the idea that there's this team that cannot win, trying to build, trying to change a culture. But to that end, I think Hugh Jackson's got to go. I mean, I don't think there's just a stigma around him. You don't see guys responding to him in any way, shape, or form. You certainly didn't last year. I don't know how that's going to change with Greg Williams and Todd Haley nipping at his heels. I think that's a big cog in the wheel that needs to change. But that's just me on the outside with an opinion. That doesn't really mean a whole lot. Anyone who says anything about hoping for Khalil Mack is the problem in our society. Wow! That's a Facebook comment. Well done. Well done. Sweeping generalization, total condemnation of probably hundreds of people you've never met. Well done. With Cole Madison not reporting, how does that work out with the roster? Well, he'll remain on the did not report list. He will not count towards the 53. Really kind of depends on how long he's out and if he ever reports. And if he ever reports before a certain date. But that's, it's pretty involved, especially when it comes to the money. There's actually a great post over at Cheesehead TV last week about kind of the financial ramifications that I highly recommend. If you just Google Cheesehead TV and Cole Madison, you'll find it. I thought it was really well done. We live in a society. That is correct, Omar. Tyrone, I'm here until Friday. I'm here tomorrow. Tomorrow night after the game will be my last Facebook Live for Packers News. After that, hold on to your butts. Obligatory Raji post. Thank you, Ralph. Do you think McCarthy will now have a more input into the final 53? Is that a bad thing? I think he'll have a little bit more say in that. I think Brian Gutekunst will be a little more open to his input in a way that Ted Thompson maybe wasn't. Although I think Ted Thompson did listen to McCarthy, probably a little bit more than most people recognize or have wanted to accept. But I do think there's more communication between Gutekunst and McCarthy, and that is something that is one of the reasons Murphy made the move that he did earlier this offseason. But ultimately, it is Gutekunst's call, and he is going to make that call, and he is going to be the one to put together that 53-man roster. That is his mandate, and that is absolutely 1,000% his job description given to him by Mark Murphy. There are places within the job that he has to acquiesce to other people, but building the 53-man roster is not one of them. That is Gutekunst's baby, and that is the whole raison d'etre, if you will, of his job. Mays, question mark? Chet still dealing with that hamstring injury. Tiffany, thank you. Thanks for checking out the live stuff and the stuff Packers News. Like I said, make sure Nagler Packers on Facebook or @Aaron Nagler on Twitter. Follow along. The adventure is just beginning. Am I still going to go to Packers games? Not as many. I definitely won't be going to all the games as I used to. I'm going to do a couple, though. I'll show up every once in a while. I'm like a bad penny. I always show up. Williams the bell cow now, I've heard. Well, Paul, I think he will be early on, mostly because of Jones' suspension. I think they trust him the most out of everybody in the backfield. But I think you'll see a liberal dose of Ty Montgomery those first 2 weeks. And once Jones gets back, he'll be put into the mix. But early on, Williams, will be the guy, so to speak. Okay, guys, I got time for one or two more. Trade Cobb, love it or shove it? Travis, I shove it. I think it would be really ridiculous to trade him at this point when you've gone through an entire offseason. If it's money driven, the reason for wanting to trade him, you should have done that way before 2 weeks before the season starts. You're going to trade Cobb, and then you're going to leave the wide receiver room with Devontae Adams, a bunch of rookies, and Jake Kumaro. I can't imagine that's going to work out too well, and I can't imagine 12 will be too happy. And not that 12 has any say, because he doesn't. But, 2 weeks before the season, moving your second best wide receiver, not a great recipe for success, especially on offense. Do I think Green Bay will win the division? Derek, check back with me prior to the start of week 1, after preseason is over. Chris? Maybe. How many Pop-Tarts do you think Eddie Lacy has eaten since the end of last season? I'll put the over-under at 7. What do you do with Tanyan? Good question, Bryce. I know there's kind of a school of thought out there that he may not make it through waivers. I tend to think he will. I know everyone's very excited about him. He's caught everything in sight. He's improved as far as his blocking goes throughout preseason, but I don't think there's anybody sitting out there ready to pounce on Tanyan as somebody on their 53. He's still pretty raw. That said, it's always possible, but I do think he ends up on the Packers practice squad. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to jump. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. Like I said, tomorrow night after the game, which will be like 1 a.m. here in New York, I'll jump on after the game for my final Facebook Live. Hope to see you there. In the meantime, barring any breaking news tonight, talk to you guys soon. Have a great night.